Hello and welcome. In this video we're going to make a mod on this amp. If you've been around on this channel for a long time, you've seen this before. This is an old practice amp that I've had for a long time, and I decided to switch out the speaker, do a mod to the gain, which we're going to talk about real soon, and I put new fabric on the outside because the fabric on the outside was torn and it had a bunch of marks and it didn't look that nice, and I wanted to see if I could make it look nice. There will be a link to the video where I did this. It's an old one, but hopefully you'll watch it and enjoy it. If you saw my last video, you know I just recently fixed up this guitar and I did something to it that I really enjoyed, which was I added a clipping to it to create distortion. Now what I did was something that I liked more than I actually thought I would, and so I was thinking that I would add the same kind of diodes to this amp. I bought a bag of diodes. These are the same ones that I put into this guitar, so if you've already seen this guitar you know exactly what is going to happen. They're called BAT41. They're shoddy diodes, which is a special kind of diodes. It's not that important actually. The thing that is important is that you're using diodes that you like. This is more of an experiment because the thing with this amp is that it has a tiny little switch here, which most of these beginner amps has, that will give you a dirty sound. So you have a clean amp and then you press the switch, it becomes a dirty amp. And dirty amp basically means they'll add a clipping circuit that distorts the amp, makes it dirty. You know, I think you all know what it is I'm talking about. Inside this amp, the clipping is made by two red LEDs that the signal goes through and that cuts off the signal to make it distort. And I'm not a very big fan of that. It sounds too much like metal music to me. It's not really my thing. So what I did to this amp was that I just removed those two diodes, or red LEDs. Now when you do that to an amp, what will happen is that it becomes louder. So if you have this at maybe 2 or something like that and you press the button, it will become so loud that it feels like you're on 8 or something. And there will be a place where there are just 2 copper wires and you can remove those and put in resistors instead, which is what I did to lower the volume so that it wouldn't be too loud. Because the thing is, it's not really good for the amp to be overpowered. The speaker might actually break. So I had to do that because I wanted the levels when I pressed the button to be more even. Now they're still not perfectly even. The resistors I put in place instead of the copper wires were not cutting the signal down enough. So I'm going to experiment with putting in these diodes now and we'll see what happens if the sound changes. I like not having the diodes more than I like having the LED diodes because it just felt like too much over gain, sort of metal music kind of thing. It's not my cup of tea. If it is, you don't have to do this mod. But I don't like that the amp right now is too sharp. It's not the kind of distortion I like where it's just like nails scraping. There will be a sound clip where you'll hear both of them. Now I felt like I could get around the sharpness by setting the EQ, so I boosted the bass more and cut the higher frequencies more. But in the sound clips, I will set the EQ to 12 o'clock, just so you know. Anyway, the first thing we're going to have to do is turn this around. On the back, there are 4 screws, and we're just going to take them out, and then we're going to look at the circuit. And just so you know before, because I feel like I have to say this, you can mess around with the electronics inside of a guitar and do whatever you want. If you make mistakes or you do anything weird, it doesn't matter. Sure, the guitar might not work, but you can always just resolder things, change out the part. There is no issue there. An amp is a different thing. There is voltage coming from an outlet into your amp and it's actually really dangerous. So if you're uncomfortable with messing around with your amp, please find a tech to do things. What we're going to do today is not something that is particularly dangerous. So yeah, but there are other parts in the amp and you shouldn't even touch them. So make sure you know what you're doing and that you know what parts you can touch and not touch, and that you know what you're doing so that you don't hurt yourself, because I really don't want to like read the news and find out that someone died because they followed along to this video. So please be careful We're not going to do anything else than change the clipping. That's all we're going to do, and we're just going to experiment and see what it sounds like, and then we are going to play the amp. We're not going to change any capacitors or anything like that. We're not going to touch those, and you shouldn't. I'm not going to go into more detail about it right now, or at least in this video, but please don't do anything weird to your amps, because it's better to just take it to someone who actually knows about amps. I'm not a professional amp builder or anything like that. I know enough about them, and I've fixed enough amps and messed around with them enough to know what I'm doing, so that I'm not hurting myself and isn't putting myself in a dangerous situation. But if you don't know anything about amps, please watch some videos about electricians and professional amp builders showing you those things. Okay, so here's the back of the amp. We'll remove the screws and we can lift off the back plate. And this is what it looks on the inside. And here you can see the circuit board. And we need to take it out, but we need to be super careful so that we don't touch all these things that can, potentially be a little bit harmful or kill you. Yeah. Next up is removing the nuts and bolts that are holding the output jacks in place, and removing the screws and the nuts and bolts holding the potentiometers in place, so that you can move things around without things loosening, basically. Yeah. Okay, so once you've taken everything out and you've moved this out of the side, you should only have to really disconnect 2 connections and be able to pull this out and just move it to the side a little bit. It shouldn't be that hard to do, and you shouldn't have to touch any of these nasty big things, so you shouldn't have any issue. Anyway, right here, if you see that I have nothing, there's nothing here, and that's because that's where the LEDs were, and I removed them. Now it's a circle, but one side has a little tiny bit of flatness to it, and that is the minus. That's what you have to keep in mind. That's the minus. Now, it might be hard to see, but I'm going to show you anyway. Hopefully you can see it. If you look at these, they're blue and one side is black. And that black side is the minus. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut these out and we're going to put them in place there. And we're just going to put them basically so the black line is on the same side as this little flatness. But one is going to go into these 2 holes and one is going to go into these 2 holes. And I'm going to show you this now, and hopefully it will make sense. Okay, so now they're here, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't really have a good way of showing you. But hopefully you can see that the black line there goes over to this side here. And the reason why I have them standing like this is because it's kind of hard to get them to lie flat. So it's easier to have them standing because the jumping between the holes is too narrow for it to lie down. So now I'm just going to solder them in place and put everything back the way it was before. And hopefully this is not something that you feel is too hard to do. So I was going to show you soldering on the back, but I noticed that the board had been ruined on the back. And that's what happens when you, instead of using a solder sucker, you move around your soldering iron trying to push things through while you're heating up to clear the hole, and you fiddle around and it ruins everything. You're supposed to use the solder sucker. Get a solder sucker. I've made a video where I talk about what you need to be able to solder, and a solder sucker is one of those things that you really, really, really need, because otherwise you're gonna have to do weird messy things like this, where you attach things through the hole with a jumper cable to somewhere where the connection is supposed to go, and you'll have to just dance around like a fool. So let's put this back together and hear the sound difference. Keep in mind that the way I record is just straight into the camera, so if it doesn't sound awesome, it could probably sound better if you do a bunch of mixing works, but I don't want to do a bunch of mixing work and things like that, because I'd rather give you an honest the way it just sounds than fiddle around with it and potentially create the idea in your head that this is more awesome than it is. Hopefully it is awesome, but most likely it's just you know, gonna sound a little bit different. So I don't want to, you know, create some weird hype where everyone runs out and starts messing up their amps because they think that this is some sort of weird golden ticket thing. I don't know. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Let's just jump into the sound clip and see what you think. Okay, so there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below if this was something that was interesting and fun. I'm planning on doing more videos about the BAT 41s, so let me know if that's something that you find interesting. I think they're kind of cool. I like the sound that they make. So, talk to me in the comments below. Let me know what you think and feel about the video, and also press the like button if you like the video. It helps me out. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing, that helps me out as well. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I would appreciate if you did. Until next time, stay awesome and cool, and go and do weird experiments with diodes, because they are actually pretty cool.